I worry about we get this period of a lot of scams, a lot of grifting from a lot of people who will learn the wrong lesson here, and then we have this huge snapback and potentially even retroactive kind of enforcement or engagement with regulators that just really puts us in a bad place over time. And I think the risk here is also that this becomes so political that 4 years from now we have this huge snapback. What qualifies as a broker dealer and what's a commodity, what's a security, something like that, which I was hopeful to get, and it was going to need and does need, a lot of people coming across the aisle and working together. That looks to be, in my mind, a much bigger political lightning rod that's going to be a lot harder to pass down.
Welcome into our space here on a huge day, the Trump inauguration, as we are all awaiting to see what changes come as President Trump takes the oath of office and kicks off his second term as president. A lot going on over the weekend as we saw Bitcoin reach an all-time high off the backs of two, not just one, but two Trump meme coin launches, one for him and one for Melania. A lot to discuss, not just for what this means for crypto, but also potentially for the world's largest economy as well. And happy to have back on Coinage with us today, Dragonfly's general partner, Rob Hadick on Coinage. Rob, I think this is the first time we've had you on this year. It's good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you too, Zach, and glad to be here again. Did a few times last year, but lots to talk about today.
A lot to dig into, and I know you were glued to the charts and to Twitter as I was, and basically everybody in crypto and around politics was as well. As we want to dig into, I think, first off, just the moves that you saw, because basically this Trump meme coin launched and quickly topped $10 billion in terms of the market cap. 80% is going to be locked up for the team. There's a lot to dig into, I guess, on that one first. We'll get into Melania and your reaction to that a little bit later. But what was Rob's reaction to all this as we saw the incoming president of the United States? It's kind of crazy to consider what we saw over the weekend, but dropping a meme coin and what that means for the market.
It is honestly unprecedented. The craziest weekend in crypto probably since FTX in November of 22. I was pretty measured about the whole thing. I think there are good and bad parts about, or at least that's what I thought on Friday, good and bad parts about this. There was just more attention. There was going to be, more people onboarded, millions of new people who potentially own these tokens. The Moonshot app was #1 in the App Store. There was clearly just, it signaled to U.S. entrepreneurs that the U.S. was open for business, that there is more innovation ready to happen here in the U.S., that we want them to be here, that there will be a more constructive regulatory framework. And so I was positive about that. I think there's a lot of real questions around things like federal like corruption mandates and concerns around what this means for foreign funding into these tokens, et cetera. I think there's a lot of concerns around what it means for partisanship more broadly. Does it make something like a market structure bill tougher to pass because there's going to be more of this political lightning rod in Washington that has where the Democrats are even more against crypto because of what happened here. So I think there were good and bad parts about what happened on Friday. That 80% insider allocation, terrible, really awful. They're clearly getting just bad advice, and my guess is that there's some really grifty advisors around this that are really trying to value extract. A really interesting point is that the total crypto market cap is actually down since Friday. So there is less money on chain today than there was on Friday night. But that was something that they maybe could have fixed over time. They could have restructured it, with good feedback. They hear the community, and it was really cool that they did it on chain. So they did it, through Meteora and Jupiter, instead of doing it, at a centralized exchange, et cetera. That my opinion on all of this, which was maybe net good or at least good and bad, that changed a lot when Melania dropped and kind of what we saw happen over the course of the weekend.
Yeah, I want to get into that too, because I do think it is pretty interesting to consider, doing it once. I was in the same camp. I thought, hey, look, it is what it is. It's a meme coin. Do I necessarily think that it's the best use of the president's power to launch a meme coin rather than maybe highlight some of the projects like ours or other ones in Web3? There are a lot of things, I'm sure, you and I have talked about them too, really good examples of where Web3 tech and DePIN and the like can be used in the world. and DeFi around the world, and then to just basically use that clout and I think momentum as being quote unquote the crypto president to highlight and drop a meme coin that, as he said, I think objectively, granted, people can gamble on this, and I myself, to be clear, did buy some on the night that it dropped just because I'm also in the trenches, as you know, Rob. But I mean, it's very
Love it.
clear to say that the people who will benefit most from this will be people attached to Trump or the president himself, I
Yep.
believe. And you're right to point out Melania. I want to bring that chart up too, because I do think that, when that happened, a lot of people changed their minds just as you did, because we saw the Trump token itself take a dip, just because I think there are limits to launching this in terms of liquidity and excitement. Once that one launched, you saw the Trump token drop by about 40%. A lot of people who would come in off the FOMO were then in the red. And I know, these things swing, but what did you make of that? Because everything you mentioned in terms of moonshot and onboarding Web2 normies did not happen with that one. It was a tough launch, straight to deck screener, Phantom kind of tricky to swap there. What changed for you?
Yeah, so you're right that they did it again with no forewarning. There wasn't like appropriate liquidity. There clearly wasn't planning. They didn't work with Jupiter or Meteor or any of these teams. They did it really haphazardly. There wasn't like a multi-sig set up beforehand, and there was even more of the tokens for insiders than less. There's 87% in this case, and even a quicker vesting schedule than the 3 months that is the Trump 80%, which is just outrageous, honestly, and like it is indefensible. And it when that happened, and then the Donald's or the president's Twitter immediately retweeted it, and everybody was just rushing in, and they were selling everything to get into this thing. It really highlighted how non-serious this was, and how this was all about just making these tokens go up. And to your point, like a bunch of the RPC nodes kind of fell over. The chain was full, but was still up. But the RPC nodes were not were falling over, and Phantom was just getting too many transactions to process. And some of that is actually a good thing for the future of Solana and the future of these services, because that type of like hardening effect allows you to continue to make these things better. And to be
Mm-hmm.
very clear, what we saw over this weekend from the amount of transactions, and that is something that would have like Cloudflare was going to fall over, like a bunch of Web 2 services were going to fall over. This thing was like unprecedented. This was not a indictment in any way on any of the RPC nodes or Phantom or anybody. It is actually, I think, really bullish and positive how well Solana did, and a lot of the call it service providers around it did. But what is not bullish is clearly that the Trump family does not seem to want to highlight the technology in the way that I do, right? And the builders in this space who I'm close to, you're close to, they're not focused on that. We were all hoping that there was a new world or a new regime that was going to help us further the innovation of decentralized finance and remaking the traditional financial systems, and
Mm-hmm.
furthering the stable coins, and for allowing for just a more technologically advantageous financial system. And clearly, like, that's not the concern, at least not at the moment.
No, but that was the hope, I think. And, I just want to bring up one thing to push the point further, Rob, because I think, again, over the weekend, it was the case that you had the crypto ball, basically everyone in the industry down in DC to celebrate what I think has been a war fought well. All of us coming together and saying, look, we're not going to stand for what Gary Gensler's SEC is doing to this industry, which I think we can all agree was necessary and good. But then the other piece of it is, as everyone's in that room, Trump drops his meme coin, which I do commend the president. I say that it was good that he didn't necessarily, come out and give everyone heads up and let everyone in that room in the industry front run this, because that was not what we heard from our sources there. It wasn't as if this was announced. But the big
Yep.
question I have, Rob, is, you've got the president coming in here. He now has these two meme coins. As you brought up, there are potential worries about foreign entities using that coin to potentially get access to things, or the president prioritizing that coin versus the wants and needs of Americans here, to be
Yep.
frank. And I think it is a question. I mean, look, obviously anyone can drop a meme coin. I'm not saying they can't, But it is very different when we're talking about the president of the United States dropping a meme coin. And I talked to a bunch of lawyers over the weekend too about this, and it did seem like if you put two and two together, the Melania launch did seem rushed, did seem like it happened right before the inauguration, as if to get ahead of some of those concerns and questions that would have been asked if either one of these launched after President Trump was sworn in, just given the fact that the Constitution does prevent a president from profiting from the office, whether from the federal government, him using his position of power to profit from the federal government, or foreign governments.
Yep.
And I think he set this up in a way that does allow him to say, look, I'm not involved in it. It's a separate company running both Melania's and Trump's meme coins here, CIC Digital and the other company for Melania. And so I think he knows what he's doing, but it doesn't answer a lot of questions about, are there potential risks here for Americans like you and myself, Rob? And that's kind of what I put to you now is are there concerns like that for you?
Yeah, of course. I don't think no American, I think, can reasonably make the argument today that there's not at least risk, right? And there's a lot of people who have had really strong reactions to this on both sides of the aisle. It does feel like a lot of the people's opinions have been jaded by just kind of how their politics align, and a lot of how they've entrenched themselves over the last 6 9 months. But putting that aside, I don't think there is an intellectually honest argument today that doesn't at least have admit that there is some risk involved in this, especially around call it the foreign governments piece, like you mentioned. I mean, this is unconfirmed, but we've seen publicly that Justin Sun had said that he put a bunch of money into World Liberty Financial overnight. We've heard from unconfirmed sources that there has been things like Saudi money or other types of capital that have come into World Liberty Financial that is maybe not just a bunch of retail traders who are trying to align themselves with Trump or make money off of this, et cetera. And when you start to hear that, when you start to see that, you have to, at least in the back of your mind, start to wonder if this isn't something that, even if it's maybe good for crypto and for new users and for focus on the industry and for furthering the cause of decentralized finance, if it's not bad for Americans, and it's not bad for the rule of law, and it's not bad for public policy, and it's not bad for what is likely to occur in this country that is already extremely divided over the next 2 4 years. And I think the risk here is also that this becomes so political that 4 years from now we have this huge snapback if there's a change in administration or there's a change in the SEC. And it's not to say that the SEC, Paul Atkins is a real guy, and he's
Mm-hmm.
going to want to enforce current SEC regs, and he's going to do so in a much more pro innovation way than we've had in the past. But I worry about, we get this period of a lot of scams, a lot of grifting from a lot of people who will learn the wrong lesson here, and then we have this huge snapback and potentially even retroactive kind of enforcement or engagement with regulators that just really puts us in a bad place over time.
Yeah, I think, putting it all together, I think the big question now, Rob, is what this means for the space. And obviously, we're a crypto show here, so we focus in on crypto. And, there are stories to watch. I don't think we're going to get the answers in day one or day two of these meme coins trading. I think, you probably got hit up as much as I did from friends and everybody else saying, hey, what's the deal with this? What should I do here? And it's really tough to talk about meme coins because, I don't know, Godspeed to anyone who's trying to do any chart analysis on those. There's no way you could have
Yep.
predicted Melania coming out unless you knew about it, and you
Well,
wouldn't have been
and
able to
to be
predict.
clear, like with Melania and the way there wasn't with Trump, there was clear front running. Like there were people involved in that, even though people couldn't get in. And so, like, it's clear that this was meant as like value extractive, and we saw this with some of the wallet tracking, and that makes it. Listen, it's really indefensible, to be honest. I've heard from very few people who like post the Melania situation are like, this feels good. Right. I don't think anybody really feels good about how, and nobody who's worked in the industry, because all of us have been here, or at least most of us have been here, hoping for kind of a better future. And to your point, I want to kind of put a really fine point, a point on it. There is there's what is good for crypto in a first order effect, but there are crypto, as we've seen for kind of the past few months, the correlation to the Nasdaq has actually reached all-time highs again. And crypto often trades as a risk asset. And if you put that in perspective, this type of volatility and anything that is bad for, call it, the rule of law in America and public policy will be bad for risk assets and will ultimately be bad for crypto prices and, crypto of itself, even if this is, bringing in more users, bringing more attention to the space, et cetera.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that point because it's something that we'll probably play in between once we're done chatting with you this morning and covering the inauguration live, as we have a bit of our interview with Hester Peirce, SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce, talking about kind of what changes at the SEC, seeing as right now it is only Republicans over there. Essentially, Gary Gensler going to be, well, I guess he's gone. Today was the day that he was supposed to resign, and now officially gonzo. And we're waiting for incoming Chair Atkins, as you said, to come in once approved and confirmed by the Senate. And I think, there are real questions now about what happens in terms of trust in markets, and not just crypto, like you said, capital markets. Like the SEC, as Gensler said in his sign-off note, crypto is one thing, but the rest of confidence in American markets could be in the balance here. And I think it is rather important to consider those things and what changes in the new SEC. But Rob, I mean, when you kind of put all the pieces together and look at the charts for Bitcoin, we did hit an all-time high, and I'm not going to give all the credit to President Trump on that, but it was interesting to see kind of some of the liquidity get sucked out. I can bring up the Solana chart in a second, but basically see Solana jump up, as you would expect, since the meme coin was launched on Solana. But then once Melania launched and kind of all the meme coins on Solana, see the huge outflow of funds from all of those essentially into Trump. It's sucked up the mind share and it's sucked up liquidity in a way that I don't think a lot of people considered. There are a lot of really good projects out there too that got dinged. I mean, what do you see happening if this is just an early preview of what 2025 is going to look like?
Yeah, it's interesting because the way we invest and what we're focused on is the technology, right? We're really focused on what are the things people are building on the core infrastructure side that can recreate a better financial and more inclusive financial system. We're really focused on things like DeFi that we think in many ways operate better than CeFi. We really focused on things like stable coins and things that we think will just kind of further the proliferation of this technology and a better financial system. And I think a lot of that takes a step back. If we're now in a world where everybody sees that, hey, listen, I can make some money, and this will lessen over time, right? So the Trump token goes to 70 bill, the Melania token goes to 12 or 13. The next one will go to less. Maybe Elon will launch one and that'll go really high again. But then every other person who wants to make a little bit of money will launch one, and all of those will be less and less and less, and people will desensitize. But that will be the focus, and we see it where people start to they want to make money on these things, and a lot of the traders are looking to kind of play these kind of big jumps in prices and then get out, and so everyone's just selling other stuff to rotate into these other things, and then they're selling it back out. And we see this rotation time and time again, which is why all of these other things dumped on Friday and dumped a little bit during Melania. I do think Bitcoin is a bit unique, and not just a bit unique, very, very unique. And so that didn't really have the same kind of outflow in the way you saw from all of the other stuff. That has continued to perform well. There's been a lot more focus on a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Poly market actually jumped, I think, to a 56 or 57% chance, up, more than double this week on how likely they think a strategic Bitcoin reserve is. There's speculation that the strategic Bitcoin reserve executive order happens in the next couple of days. There's questions around whether Trump can legally do that and how he would legally do that, but whether or not however that gets litigated over time, and if it goes through legislation or not, that sort of signal for Bitcoin as a reserve asset and for all of the institutions who are continuing to see Bitcoin as part of their portfolio allocation, that's great for that asset specifically. For the rest of the market, I think a lot of the focus is going to be on, these meme coins or these celebrity tokens, and not on, necessarily the things that, all of us are hoping will kind of reinvent the world and the current global financial system. But there is a possibility that we look back at this 3 months from now, and we see this as a blip, and it was a crazy time, and now it's back to regular programming. But I have a concern that that won't be true.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be one of those things to watch, and even in the DeFi space. By the way, when we talk about projects that have existed in terms of what we might see in the continuation of a lot of the things that I think you and I and a lot of people in crypto are excited about, is really taking on big banks, and it's very strange to see World Liberty Financial now take off in a way that Donald Trump Jr. was talking about it in August of this year, or sorry, last year, talking about taking on the big banks, that they weren't going to do a meme coin, that this was all about, really leaning into helping the unbanked, which I'm not entirely sure. Again, I have no dog in this fight. And really, honestly, don't care one way or the other how you feel politically. But just in terms of maybe the poster children of the debanked, I'm not entirely sure if the Trump children would be the people I imagine in my head. But I do think the way that that project has been launched, as you mentioned, Justin Sun also involved, a bunch of people outside the U.S. involved. I don't know what that looks like, because they went the accredited investor route, and you keep piecing all these things together. And regardless of how you feel politically, if you're coming from a pro crypto mindset, Rob, there are a lot of people, and I'd be curious to get your take as a VC here. There are a lot of people who are very upset with the way that even crypto has kind of seen VCs take allocations. We talked about this before, VC dumping on people. We saw the AICC token launch that pissed a lot of people off after Bankless Ventures dumped on people. And so I wonder if how much of this is brought on by the industry itself by not fully leaning into actually walking the walk when it comes to read, write, own, and what Chris Dixon's book is all about. And yet we see the things that A16Z does. So I'm just curious, as someone in that world, how much of this you feel like is on VC's shoulders or the industry itself, or maybe not being fully Web3 or walking the walk?
Well, none, zero. Maybe you're surprised by that answer, but listen,
I'm
I think
not.
there's a couple of things. I mean, listen, you didn't tell me you're going to ask that question, and I appreciate you kind of jumping that on me right here. So I can affirmatively say, no, I don't think the Trump meme coin is VC's fault at all. No, but listen, I'll say this. I think there's a couple points to your question. First is just like World Liberty itself, right? And to your point, they went the accredited investor route. They've talked about banking the unbanked. I think that conversation, no matter who it comes from, like there are a lot of entrepreneurs of all backgrounds who are trying to build good DeFi protocols. And to be fair, like this is a different team than the Trump meme coin was, and the Trump meme coin was a different team than the Melania meme coin. And the team that is doing World Liberty Financial, are ex Ethereum, DeFi founders that from a thing called Doe Finance. And I think they're just, I think a lot of these things are happening in silos. That said, on the World Liberty Financial side, I expect we'll see like a real, I would say, change and how that is put together. I think they've gone the accredited investor route. It's supposed to be non-transferable. Like to your point, I think all of that changes, and they just restructure the whole thing now that the Trump meme coin has kind of laid the foundation,
Mm-hmm.
and that they just decide that accredited doesn't matter anymore. We'll see if that happens. I have no inside information, but like I think they'll just full value extraction, just change the whole thing. Now, to your question about like whether or not VCs dumping on retail, like et cetera, like I've been pretty outspoken about this, that I think it's like a very silly conversation, and I think frankly most of that conversation has been pushed by traders, like, and we're talking whales, like other funds, et cetera, who are just have their own incentives, and their incentive is to try to launch these things that are quote unquote fair launches, but get a lot of their own early allocations that are essentially at venture capital, or early valuations, and then go and pump them on their Twitters to a bunch of other people and be like, "Fair launch! It was so fair. All of us insiders, it doesn't matter that we got them. It was fair, right?" And so I think the reality is that like there are venture capitalists who certainly in the space who certainly engage in practices that I would not condone,
Mm-hmm.
and then there are those I think who are want nothing better, or want nothing more than to back like founders who are trying to you know really kind of like I've continued to say, like reinvent the financial system, or continue to innovate, and who just need some capital and some help to be able to go and do that. And that's what we
Yeah.
do. That's what I do. um, but I I think, we've talked a little bit about Echo and these other things. And I think, having community building and getting, allowing people to participate in, the success of those projects, like that is important, but that is
Yeah.
not dichotomous with venture capital. That is part of and hand in hand with a fundraising strategy and a community building strategy, much like, what you've done here at Coinage.
Yes, well, I appreciate the answer, and I didn't mean to come across as accusatory because let me make it clear that we love Rob Haddock and we love Dragonfly and we love you coming on the
But
show.
we love you guys
What I'm
too.
talking about is over the weekend we had a lot of blowback, I think, in terms of people in the meme coin space who are like, hey, don't come for my meme coins. This is all fun and games and it's, gambling's gambling. And look, I think that's fine. But I do think that the reason why we've had the Murads of the world come out and say invest in Colts and buy meme coins and hold them is because there is the same angst that came out of the GameStop saga for people saying, I don't like the old system, burn it to the ground. And we're seeing a lot of some of those shenanigans come over into the crypto side. And clearly, whenever there are those arguments made, a lot of the anger and angst is sometimes directed towards, VCs and the quote unquote tech, which I don't necessarily agree with that point either, because look at what's happening with Solana and everyone's saying, oh, we don't want the tech. It's like Solana was the tech and it's 10x, and look at what's happening on the chain. And so I don't think that argument is right either. But yes, you're right. I'm hoping, by the way, we've had conversations with a lot of different people, and it has been tough to launch a project that is not based on grow chain drop token. But I am hoping, and my whole point over the weekend was I'm hoping that people in the space wake up and say, all right, what do we really want to support here? And I appreciate you saying that about Coinage, because that's what we're trying to do here in terms of creating a community-owned outlet and letting people buy an NFT that opens up dividends, not just allowed for accredited investors, because it takes a lot of effort and time to pursue that and open it up to anybody. And I do mean anybody. You can mint one right now. But Rob, I think when we look ahead to this, when you put all the pieces together and you think about some of the things that had people more bullish to wrap up 24 and the reality of them, you mentioned kind of the idea of strategic reserve. We'll see what happens when Trump speaks today at the inauguration, whether or not he's going to mention any of that or his meme coins. But the idea of getting a strategic reserve was already shaky anyways. You really do need
Yep.
congressional approval for that. At the Bitcoin conference, he promised just holding all the Bitcoin the U.S. government currently owns, which is possible. But when you consider kind of some of these other polymarket odds, which we'll bring up, I have a feeling that he's spent a lot of political capital now. And I think that's where the other piece of the anger is coming from. People are waking up to the idea of, is he really going to push for a Bitcoin reserve? Can Democrats get on board with that after what happened this weekend? What do you think about what's happening in DC and all the effort that's gone into lobbying DC that could potentially have been spent already?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of the concern, right? And to your point about, the SBR, obviously that Loomis bill has been kind of sitting out there for a while, talking about, putting up to 5% of the treasury and in Bitcoin. And the administration or the upcoming administration has been talking about, potentially putting, an executive order out there about, an SBR. Maybe they have some sort of ability to do this through the Federal Reserve that doesn't require legislation. Potentially, that is, I think, to your point, going to be hotly contested and definitely litigated if it happens. We also know that there's a bunch of states out there who are actively starting to put together legislation within their state houses of state governments to potentially do Bitcoin reserves at the state level. I think all of that. Frankly, I think this is my personal opinion. It's pretty silly. Like clearly, like there are a lot of ways to run a treasury, and there are a lot of ways to run a U.S. dollar, and I don't think any of them smartly probably have really volatile assets that's in underneath them. This has nothing to do with Bitcoin. Has nothing to do with crypto. Just volatility in assets should probably not be backing of the U.S. dollar. That's just my personal opinion. It goes back to, I think, kind of core economics, right?
Yeah.
That said, I think the to your second question, like to the political capital piece, like this is what's clear is that like now crypto is part of the Trump family business, and they are going to want to further the Trump family business. He always has, right? And that means that this is going to continue to be a focus of his, but it also means that he has decided that he is going to make this more partisan, or he just maybe he hasn't decided that explicitly, but implicitly that's what's happened, right? So things like reasonable conversations around, I think maybe less so on the SBR side, but more like call it a market structure bill that was going to already be hotly debated around what qualifies as a broker dealer and what's a commodity, what's a security, something like that, which I was hopeful to get. And was going to need and does need, a lot of people coming across the aisle and working together. That
Mhm.
looks to be, in my mind, a much bigger political lightning rod that's going to be a lot harder to pass now.
Well, if you're just joining us right now, we're chatting with Rob Hadick, general partner at Dragonfly, one of the top VCs in the crypto space. And Rob, a Coinage member, or at least a subscriber tier. Hopefully, we can step you up this year with more appearances. Love having you on the show as always. And we're going to be covering live from DC the Trump inauguration here, which we will be taking live on the stream in just a few moments. But Rob, while we have you and kind of unpacking everything you just walked us through, in terms of the meme coin launches, Bitcoin, Solana, everything that happens in this space. We also do want to highlight that we just crowned Solana our crypto project of the year over the weekend because not because of what happened with the Trump meme coins, but just because of our community saying that they got the most done in 24 and are most optimistic about what happens in 25. You yourself had nominated Polymarket, which we also had in the competition. Prediction markets are another huge thing that I think get very interesting this year. Dragonfly, obviously an investor in Polymarket. But you had Trump Jr. Joining Kalshi as an advisor, the competitor, another prediction market. And I'm just kind of curious because that was such a huge narrative in 24 in terms of the use case of crypto, in terms of people using crypto to navigate markets. I'm curious what you make of what other things like that might happen in 25, what you see as the growth opportunity there. How does that trend continue, or is there something else that you're watching when it comes to mainstream adoption? Could be meme coins.
Yeah, so I think meme coins are clearly going to be top of the list, especially after what happened this week. Like there is no doubt about it. With the amount of supply that we're going to see of meme coins from all types of celebrities, politicians, etc., that's going to balloon. That's something we should all be ready for, and that's probably going to be a liquidity suck from some of the things that I think have been, really interesting, like a poly market, etc. That said, probably, and this is, I think not surprising, but probably the thing I'm most bullish on this year is really starting to see actual usage of stablecoins in payments. So stablecoins, obviously they've continued to grow dramatically. They were over 200 billion. That has been a number that has continued to kind of inch up every month over month. But what we've seen a lot of is there's been some peer-to-peer happening in emerging markets. There's been a lot of DeFi use. There's been a lot of USDT used on centralized exchanges for trading. And what we really started to see kind of pick up in the back half of last year was now real world use cases of large or mid-sized companies for things like payouts, contractor payments, payroll, stuff like that, and also just like cross-border payments, B2B payments. All of those things started to grow extremely quickly in the space. And I think one of the things that we'll be talking about at the end of this year is probably a more decentralized version of what is essentially an on-chain, FX clearinghouse for payments that is really reinventing the way cross-border or like a Wise for business or wallets do business. And that's something that I think will be, if not the biggest kind of change in
Yeah.
use case for this year, among it.
Well, the other big thing, too, I wanted to get your take before we let you go on agents is the idea of AI playing a larger and larger role and how that fits into crypto. We've seen some early experimentation with AI agents and tokens tied to AI agents. I think it's rather interesting, though, that at this inauguration, you're going to have not just Elon Musk, but also Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and TikTok CEO, and OpenAI CEO Sam Altman. So basically, everybody in tech is at this thing. And I think we've seen before the administration is not being so friendly to some tech giants under Democrats. And when you consider AI being such a hot piece of not just traditional markets, but also the crypto market, I mean, are you more in the camp that that's a net good, a net bad, how some of those deals might shake out? Because we've had a few guests come on and say, look, this AI agent narrative is overblown. It's not real yet. Stay tuned. But I think the early primitives are there for kind of on-chain bots transacting, as you said. It opens up a lot of possibilities. But what does Rob Hadick say about kind of what people should be considering when it comes to investing in AI tokens, just as kind of how hot they were to kick off the year, kind of lost some momentum after Trump shenanigans.
Yeah, so the current state or the current meta of like AI agent tokens is primarily, just basically Twitter bots with meme coins. Like that's what it
Mm-hmm.
is. Like there is not really like much else happening. Like yes, AI16Z, has this, GitHub repository that, is extremely active and that people are using in terms of a framework. But mostly, these things have existed in just like, people wanting to trade the momentum of AI more broadly. I am hopeful that here's what I would say: agents are coming, and like agents are going to be a big part of everything we do on chain or off chain. Like Jensen Huang was very clear about this when he spoke at CES. Like we're moving into an agentic economy. Like there is going to be a very clear use case for agents to transact on chain and maybe to be involved in certain types of payments, etc.
Mm-hmm.
What exists on chain today in that meta is mostly just all memetic, frankly.
Yeah, but is
And
it
that
what
doesn't
would be
mean
the advice then though to people, right, that are kind of in retail trading these, because AI16Z, as we were showing the chart, off by about 25% this week, as some of that momentum comes out of it. But I mean, is a better way to play it just kind of, I suppose I'd hate to say it to everybody who hates the tech, but maybe buying the picks and shovels in some of these ecosystems that are enabling maybe some of the speeds that are required for transactions among agents, some of the, I guess, tooling that's required for the agents. How do you kind of see, I guess, the best opportunities for the average investor?
well, so I don't give financial advice. The SEC doesn't allow me to do that. So,
Yes.
but what I would say broadly is like, the market's not going away. I would focus on things that people believe will be able to build ecosystems around them, and that will be able to subsist longer than just and do things more than just tweet, right? I so like maybe focus on that. Picks and shovels, we're obviously big believers in continuing to further what those picks and shovels look like. I think the reality is like with this Solana meme coin weekend and how well the chain performed, and it's clear that a lot of what will be enabled on in crypto is going to happen in like low latency, high throughput chains. And so continuing to figure out where there's interesting economies being built in these like low latency, high throughput places is going to be very important. And so maybe that's a way that people can use a framework to figure out how they want to invest their money.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot of this in flux, and we'll see exactly what shakes out today, even and very shortly thereafter. But I do know one thing, Rob, and that is that our community and myself personally appreciate you coming on every time, because we always learn something, and it's always super helpful to hear your thoughts. And again, appreciate the time, because I know you could be anywhere right now. And good luck, by the way, to your Buckeyes, because
Go Bucks.
big day.
Yeah.
Despite
Yep.
everything that's going on, let's not forget the important things here in this country, which is football among above everything else, if you ask me. So good luck to your
That's right.
Buckeyes.
Thanks, Zach. I really appreciate it. Had a ton of fun.
All right, thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. There you go. Dragonfly's GP Rob Hadick joining us there on Coinage.